Espresso. Every milk-based coffee drink you've ever ordered started here. Espresso is made by forcing near boiling water through finely packed coffee grounds at around 9 bars of pressure. That's roughly 9 times the pressure of the atmosphere. The whole extraction takes about 25 to 30 seconds. What comes out is roughly 1 to 2 ounces of intensely concentrated liquid that is thick, syrupy, and bold in a way that no other brewing method produces. That layer of reddish gold foam on top, the crema, is emulsified coffee oils. It carries most of the aroma and gives the shot a slight bitterness on the tongue that disappears as you drink deeper into the cup. The first espresso machine was patented in Turin in 1884 by a man named Angelo Moriondo. It was built specifically to speed up service in his hotel bars. Americano. An Americano is espresso with hot water added to it. It's typically 1 or 2 shots, topped up to around 6 to 8 ounces. The result is a longer, lighter drink that looks similar to drip coffee but tastes completely different. The espresso base gives it a smoothness and depth that drip coffee does not have. The drink reportedly got its name during World War II, when American soldiers stationed in Italy found the local espresso far too small and far too strong. They started diluting it with hot water until it resembled the drip coffee they drank back home. The Italians, watching this happen, named the drink after the people doing it. Latte. A latte is 1 or 2 shots of espresso combined with steamed milk, usually around 6 to 8 ounces, and finished with a thin layer of microfoam on top. The milk is steamed to a silky, velvety consistency with fine, barely visible bubbles, which gives the drink a smooth, creamy texture from first sip to last. Italy and America have very different ideas about what a latte is. In Italy, cafe latte is a home drink. It's espresso poured into warm milk at breakfast, nothing elaborate. In America, the latte evolved into a layered, steamed, barista-crafted drink with a thin skin of microfoam on top, often served in a 12 or 16-ounce cup. Cappuccino. The milk in a cappuccino is not the same as latte milk. In a cappuccino, it is steamed to a dry, airy foam that is thick and cloud-like, with a texture closer to shaving cream than liquid. That foam sits stacked on top of the espresso rather than blending into it, giving you distinct layers in every sip of the bold shot underneath and the soft, milky foam on top. The ratio holds at equal thirds each of espresso, steamed milk, and dry foam. The drink is named after the Capuchin religious order, whose brown robes match the color of the drink. In Italy, ordering a cappuccino after 11 a.m. marks you immediately as a tourist. Italians genuinely believe the milk content disrupts digestion, and most of them would not touch one after a meal. Affogato. Affogato is made by pouring a shot of hot espresso over a scoop of ice cream or gelato. Originating in Italy, it is built around one simple contrast: hot espresso meeting cold, sweet gelato. As the espresso slowly melts the gelato, the two begin to merge, creating a rich interplay of temperatures, textures, and flavors. Over time, they transform into something that is neither entirely coffee nor entirely dessert. The word affogato comes from Italian and means drowned, referring to the scoop of gelato submerged beneath the espresso. Flat white. The flat white sits between a latte and a cortado. Australia and New Zealand both claim to have invented it in the 1980s. What makes it distinct is the milk. A flat white is typically made with a double espresso. The milk is steamed to a microfoam, so fine it's almost liquid, then poured in a slow, controlled stream that integrates fully with the coffee rather than sitting on top of it. The result is a uniformly smooth, velvety drink from first sip to last, with no visible foam layer on the surface. It is smaller and stronger than a latte, but creamier and rounder than a cortado. The name describes the surface. It's completely flat with no foam rise. Cortado. Cortado comes from the Spanish verb cortar, meaning to cut. The milk does not soften the espresso here, it cuts the acidity. A cortado is equal parts espresso and warm steamed milk, served in a small glass with almost no foam. The milk is heated, but not heavily aerated, so it blends cleanly with the shot without dulling its strength. It originated in Spain and spread through Latin America before making its way into third-wave coffee shops in the U.S. In San Francisco, Blue Bottle Coffee started serving it in a specific short glass called a Libby Gibraltar in the mid-2000s and named the drink after the glass. It's technically the same drink. The name just depends on which coast you're on. Macchiato. Macchiato means stained in Italian. The drink is a single or double espresso marked with a small spoonful of foam on top that is just enough to soften the first sip. The foam sits as a small white dot on the surface of the dark shot. The drink is 2 ounces, quite intense, and meant to be consumed in about 3 sips. The Starbucks Caramel Macchiato, by contrast, is a 16-ounce layered vanilla latte with espresso poured over the top and caramel drizzled over that. Using the same name for both is the source of a very specific kind of cafe confusion: mocha. Today, a mocha is typically espresso mixed with chocolate syrup or cocoa, then topped with steamed milk and sometimes whipped cream. Rich, sweet, and closer to dessert than a standard coffee drink. The drink, however, is named after a port city, Mocha, in Yemen, that controlled most of the world's coffee trade in the 15th and 16th centuries. Coffee from that region had a naturally chocolatey depth to the flavor, not added chocolate, just the bean itself. When people started combining espresso with actual chocolate centuries later, they borrowed the name Turkish coffee. Turkish coffee is cooked, not brewed. Extremely fine coffee, ground closer to powder than to grit, is measured into a small brass or copper pot called a sezv, combined with cold water and sometimes sugar, and placed directly over heat. The mixture is brought slowly to the edge of a boil, pulled back before it spills over, and sometimes brought up twice more before being poured directly into the cup, grounds and all. The coffee is dense, strong, and slightly thick in the mouth. You drink until you hit sediment, and then you stop. Then in Turkey and across the Balkans, what happens to that sediment is, depending on who you ask, either tradition or entertainment. The cup is flipped upside down onto its saucer, left to cool, and then the dried grounds left inside are read for fortunes. The practice is called tasseography and has been taken seriously for centuries. Café Cubano. The foam on a Café Cubano is not steamed milk. It is made from sugar and espresso alone. The very first drops of a fresh espresso shot are caught in a small cup and beaten vigorously with several spoonfuls of white sugar until the mixture turns pale, thick, and glossy. That paste is called espuma. The rest of the shot is then poured directly over it, creating a dense, sweet foam that sits solid on the surface rather than dissolving into the drink. The result is a very small, intensely sweet, and deeply concentrated drink that's meant to be consumed in a few short sips. Cuban exiles brought it to Miami in the 1960s. It became so embedded in the city's daily rhythm that some neighborhoods still run entirely on it. Arabic coffee. Before the English word coffee existed, there was kahwa, which is Arabic for coffee, but also Arabic for wine. It is brewed from lightly roasted Arabica beans with ground cardamom, sometimes saffron, sometimes cloves, and served pale gold in small handleless cups called finjan. The flavor is mild and aromatic. It's far lighter in body and bitterness than espresso, with a warm, spiced quality that lingers after the cup is empty. Coffee spread through the Arab world partly because alcohol was forbidden under Islamic law. Kahwa arrived as the legal alternative, something stimulating, social, and permitted. In Gulf countries, the cup is refilled the moment it is emptied until you signal you're done by tilting it gently side to side. Refusing a cup outright is a social offense. In 2015, UNESCO formally added Arabic coffee to its intangible cultural heritage list. Ethiopian Buna. Ethiopia is the natural homeland of Coffea arabica, which is the species that produces the majority of the world's coffee. During the Ethiopian coffee ritual, buna, raw green beans, are washed, dried, and roasted by hand over an open flame in the same room as the guests. The smoke drifts through the space as a signal the ceremony has begun. The roasted beans are ground by hand in a wooden mortar and brewed in a clay pot called a jabina. It is served without milk in 3 rounds: abel, tona, and baraka. Each round is progressively weaker. The third round, baraka, means blessing and leaving before it arrives, is considered rude. Vietnamese egg coffee. In 1946, during the First Indochina War, fresh milk became nearly impossible to find in Hanoi. A bartender at the Sofitel Legend Metropole Hotel named Nguyen Van Giang needed a substitute. He started beating egg yolks together with condensed milk and sugar until the mixture became thick, pale, and custard-like, then spooned it carefully over a small cup of strong Vietnamese Robusta coffee. The result sat in layers, the hot coffee below, the soft, sweet egg cream on top. Nguyen Van Giang eventually left the hotel and opened his own cafe, Cafe Giang, on a narrow alley in the Hoan Kiem district of Hanoi. It's still there. His son runs it now. The recipe has not changed. Café de Oli. A native to Mexico, Café de Ola is coffee simmered in an unglazed clay pot with cinnamon sticks and piloncillo, that is, dark, raw, unrefined sugar pressed into a solid cone. The combination of spice and unprocessed sugar gives the drink a warm, slightly earthy sweetness that refined sugar and a metal pot cannot replicate. The clay itself is an unglazed pot that is porous and releases trace minerals into the liquid as the coffee simmers. Every pot carries the flavor of every brew it has ever held. It is a rural, seasonal drink made over an open fire and closely associated with cold mountain mornings, the Day of the Dead, and Christmas. Finnish Kafeost Finland is the highest per capita coffee-consuming nation in the world, with roughly 12 kilograms consumed per person per year. And one of its most distinctive coffee traditions involves dropping cheese directly into the cup. Kafeost, coffee cheese, comes from the Sami people of northern Scandinavia. A mild, squeaky cheese called leipa juusto is cut into cubes and placed into a hot cup of coffee. The cheese does not melt. It absorbs the liquid, softens slightly, and takes on the bitterness of the coffee while keeping its shape. You drink the coffee first, then eat the cheese with a spoon. The cheese tastes like a very mild, slightly bitter dairy. Café Touba. Most people who've never been to Senegal have never heard of Café Touba. Café Touba is brewed with coffee and a West African spice called grains of selim, also known as selim pepper, which gives it a warm, spiced, faintly medicinal depth that has no comparison anywhere in Western coffee culture. It is the most widely consumed drink in the country, ahead of regular coffee and ahead of tea. Street vendors pour it from large metal thermos canisters across Dakar every morning, and the aroma reaches you before the vendor does. Mazagran. The first iced coffee was not a frappuccino. It was not invented by a cafe chain, and it did not come with whipped cream. It came from a French military garrison in Algeria in the 1840s, when soldiers at the outpost of Mazagran ran low on milk and started drinking their coffee cold, black, and unsweetened over ice because that was all they had. They brought the habit back to Paris, where it became fashionable in cafes for a few decades before fading out. The drink evolved differently across countries. Portugal kept the name and reinvented it as espresso over ice with a squeeze of fresh lemon juice and sometimes sparkling water. This version is cold, tart, and unlike any other iced coffee in existence. Yun Yung, Hong Kong solved a problem that no one else thought was a problem. Coffee or tea? Why not both? Yun Yung combines strong black tea brewed with evaporated milk and coffee, usually at a ratio of 2 parts tea to 1 part coffee. The result is simultaneously bitter, malty, creamy, and caffeinated in a way that neither drink achieves on its own. The name comes from the mandarin duck, a bird where the male and female look completely different from each other, used culturally to represent two unlike things joined together. Scandinavian egg coffee. This is not the same thing as Vietnamese egg coffee. In Scandinavian tradition, specifically among Norwegian immigrant communities in the American Midwest, the egg goes in before brewing, not after. A raw egg, sometimes including the crushed shell, is mixed directly into dry coffee grounds. When hot water is added, the egg proteins coagulate and bind to the bitter oils and acids in the coffee, pulling them to the surface in a floating clump that gets left behind when you pour. The method arrived in Wisconsin and Minnesota with Norwegian immigrants in the 1800s and is still made at church gatherings and community halls in parts of both states. Cold brew. Cold brew is not iced coffee. Iced coffee is hot brewed coffee poured over ice. It's fast, slightly acidic, and bitter at the edges. Cold brew, on the other hand, is coffee steeped in cold water for 12 to 24 hours with no heat involved at any point. Because heat is never used, the extraction process skips most of the acidic and bitter compounds that hot water pulls from the grounds. What comes out is a concentrate that is naturally smoother and slightly sweeter without any additives. Cold brew as a concept predates its commercial popularity by decades, but the U.S. market did not take it seriously until around 2015. Within 3 years, it had gone from a specialty cafe curiosity to a standard menu item at every major coffee chain. Nitro Cold Brew. Nitro Cold Brew is cold brew infused with nitrogen gas and served on tap. It is poured like a draft beer with a slow cascade and a creamy foam head. The nitrogen creates bubbles so fine they are almost invisible, giving the liquid a thick, velvety mouthfeel without any dairy at all. The nitrogen also does something unexpected to the flavor. It suppresses the perception of bitterness on the palate, making the coffee taste noticeably sweeter with no sugar, no dairy, and no flavoring added. The sweetness is a direct physical effect of the gas. Starbucks launched it commercially in 2016, and it is now one of the top-selling iced drinks on their menu. Dalgona coffee. Dalgona coffee was not invented during the pandemic. A retired shipwright in Macau named Leong Kam Han had been making it at his small cafe for years as instant coffee beaten vigorously with equal parts sugar and hot water until the mixture triples in volume and turns thick, pale, and glossy. It is then spooned over a glass of cold milk. The foam sits on top like a soft cloud. You stir it down yourself or drink through it. In January 2020, a South Korean actor tried it on a television show and said it reminded him of a Korean honeycomb candy called dalgona. Then lockdowns hit globally. People had nothing but time and instant coffee at home, and the hashtag Dalgona Coffee Challenge accumulated over 17 million TikTok views in a matter of weeks. Leong Kam Han did not get famous. His drink did, Kopi Luwak. Kopi luwak is made from coffee beans that have passed through the digestive system of the Asian palm civet, a small nocturnal mammal native to Southeast Asia. The civet eats ripe coffee cherries for their fruit and cannot digest the beans inside. The beans pass through intact. Once recovered, cleaned, and roasted, those beans become one of the most expensive coffees in the world, selling for up to $600 per kilogram. The flavor is described as smooth and low in bitterness. Most of the Kopi Luwak sold globally today comes from civets kept in cages on farms, which has nothing to do with the wild civet process the original reputation was built on.